Hello there. Today on the Hoovian Espresso we are going to be reviewing an episode that's been a long time coming, the season finale of Doctor Who Series 11, The Battle of Ranskoor AV Kolos, which is available now to view on BBC iPlayer if you have not yet seen it. And I've finally learned on what they call it in America. It's BBC America On Demand. So if you want to watch it on BBC in America, it's on BBC America On Demand, which is really uncreative a name, if you ask me, and I could probably have thought that up if I guessed it anyway. But anyway, spoilers are ahead for this episode, and there are a couple here. And we'll get to them in a minute. So, the Battle of Ranskoor Av Kolos. It's not AV Kolos, it's Av Kolos. Which is quite possibly the most bizarre episode. And this episode, I think, is let down by the fact that once again a lot of expectations were high, because this is the season finale, and season finales tend to be good, and this one was not what I would call a good season finale. I think this episode very much demonstrates one of my greatest fears about Chris Chibnall being showrunner. One of my fundamental issues with this season is not the Doctor. She is kind of one of the problems, because she is a bit annoying at points, but the fundamental problem I had with Series 11 going into it, making me know that I thought this season was going to be weak, what kind of stabilised that is because Chris Chibnall is going to be running it. Chris Chibnall, in my eyes, is quite possibly one of the weakest writers you could have chosen to be showrunner at this point. I don't think you could have chosen Chris Chibnall. I mean, I think you would have had to go out of your way to find a writer who never associated himself with Doctor Who before at this point. Because the only other person I could have thought of that could have really been showrunner, except from Chris Chibnall, is... oh, what's his name? Mark Gatiss, who probably will never write for the show again. And it's a shame, because he did have some good episodes up until season 9-ish, when his episodes started downhill. I think for this, Chris Chibnall's writing is once again, it's a typical Chris Chibnall story. They all follow the same plotting. They have an interesting opening sequence or so. The story, the premise, seems interesting, but it's not very well executed. It has a good concept, but it's not very well executed. And the resolution of the story, it's just downright... sorry, my cat just came in. It just doesn't feel like a resolution. It just feels like that episode suddenly stopped. And the only episode that this actually works in is the Ghost Monument, because it's a race that's fast paced. I think his system works better there. I think I put this episode on par with the Ghost Monument, because there is some aspects of this episode that I do like about it. Not that much though. It is one of the weaker yet better stories of the season, which is kind of hard. It's kind of where I class the Ghost Monument. It's slightly better and slightly weaker. Really quite hard to describe. It's sort of this weird feeling when you have an episode and you can't quite decide if it's negative or a positive episode. There's usually more positives than negatives. For example, in this story, we have a great guest cast. By far the best written Chris Chibnall story. It doesn't feel like it has a beginning, a middle, or an end. It just feels like beginning, end. And once again, something that the Chris Chibnall era has suffered across the board is telling and not showing. I think is the way to say it. Where they tell you blah 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 how they're going to do it, and then it happens, and it doesn't feel like there was anything leading up to that point. It's just suddenly the Doctor has this idea and suddenly it's executed. So you have the beginning, Jodie has an idea, end. There's no middle really, because it's not really fully explained. I think that's something Arachnids in the UK suffers from. Woman Who Fell to Earth suffers from it. The Stenza one, the Ghost Monument one, I was willing to be more forgiving to the Ghost Monument because I thought a lot would have been explained, a lot more would have been explained in the Ghost Monument in this episode, because a popular theory that was going round at the point before this episode was, and I'd just like to point out, this theory went crazy literally a day after I put my video up, and clearly nobody got it from my video because only 5 people watched it, but yeah, so everyone seemed to get that. So I think this episode as a finale is very weak, as in really quite weak, and it does not stand up very well against other finales that you have. Even episodes like Hellbent sort of have more of a plot than this. That has a beginning, a middle and an end, and much like most other Chris Chibnall stories, this doesn't really. I thought this feels like more of an ending to The Woman Who Fell to Earth, or a second part of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, or like a sequel to The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which it is, of course, because the most predictable thing on planet Earth happens. And that's one of the other things Chris Chibnall really has a problem with. His episodes are highly predictable. Anyone who did not see this coming is kind of a bit, yeah. Because it's very obvious, particularly if you watch the entire series. Of course, Tim Shaw returns. And I'm sure a lot of people will know my feelings towards Tim Shaw. He's quite possibly one of the worst villains Doctor Who has seen. And he's, in my opinion, weaker than the Pating. Because at least the Pating looked pleasant and cute and so on, and alright, it wasn't exactly the most motivational. I didn't have the greatest motives, it just wanted to eat. But it was still a better villain than the horribly written Stenza. I think the Pating felt more original than the Stenza, because the Stenza is just a rip-off of the Daleks and the Cyberman. It's Chris Chibnall's attempt to make something quite, to make something as famous or as popular as the Daleks or the Cybermen. This is the Doctor's new greatest villain, and he sort of fails because it's very obvious that, because you can do CGI Daleks, you can do an army of CGI Daleks, or you can do an army of CGI Cybermen, and to a certain extent you could do an army of Stenza with the masks on, but you wouldn't be able to see what they all look like because they're all black. All their suits are black, so it would just be a big void of black. And then it's because you can't define all the special facial features, because that would be too expensive, of course, because it's the BBC. I know the budget was, went up for this series, but it's kind of still, you can't, their suits are all jet black. So it would just be a black fuzz on the screen if you did an army of them. So in the same way, it's quite hard to portray an army of Sontarans, because that's why there's very few stories with an army of Sontarans. So it's quite a hard thing to do. And the Stenza just aren't a compelling villain because their concept has been done 1,001 times before. So in this episode, we meet Tim Shaw. Of course, Graham is once again the best thing to come out of this, as he learns to be the bigger man and to not kill Tim Shaw. I think Graham and Ryan has been one of the better things to come out of Series 11. Their relationship is really nice. I also like the way they kept on going back to Grace and reminding us of that throughout the series. I think the series arc for this series has been Grace, and what would Grace do? And then, of course, that kind of resoluted last week and It Takes You Away, but I think that resolution is built upon in this episode. He realises that that Grace would want him to be the bigger man. I think that's an important and a good thing about this episode. The concept of the arcs was interesting. I did like them. They have a bit... I think Chris Chibnall has been not very creative with creating names for species this year, because we've had the Stenza, the Arcs and the Pating. It's a bit... It's like that kid where you're stuck at the end of I don't know, some kind of game, or when you have to guess a word and all the good words are gone, so you have to make one up. Pretend, oh yeah, this is definition for this word, but it's not. I mean, like the Cybermen, the Daleks. I mean, the Daleks is Khaled spelled backwards, which is the name of the race that Daleks were made, so that's quite reasonable. I can allow that. And then Cybermen, well, it does what it says on the tin. It's a Cyberman. Cyber technology man. You know? It's just... yeah. The guest cast this week were phenomenal. I actually was really happy with the guest cast this week. Palatraki was great character. He was a nice standing up character. It's nice to have a character like that who really cares about his crew and really cares about what he's doing. And it's nice to have that mystery where at the start he's remembering things, and as he remembers, the viewer starts to learn more about what's going on. That sort of worked. Even if it did mean we basically sacrificed a middle, because we basically had an extended beginning, is how I felt that paid out. This episode, more than any, would have benefited from being 60 minutes. Being an hour or so, having that extra 10 minutes would have really helped this episode. I feel... I'm surprised they didn't, because a lot of season finales have been 60 minutes. Pretty sure the Russell T Davies ones were 60 minutes. So yeah, I don't know why the season premiere was 60 minutes and not the season finale. Because that feels rather stretched out at points, actually. If you ask me. You know? But yeah, Phyllis Logan's character, the two Ux characters, were also very good. Both good actresses. One actress and an actor. They're both a nice little thing. I love their story arc as well. They start by learning about their religion, and then they've been twisted by Tim Shaw, and now they go out and teach their faith and learn about the universe as well. So that was also good. So the guest cast were very good in this episode. I think the companions felt quite evenly spaced out, I think, to the best of Chris Chibnall's ability. I think this is probably the one episode Chris Chibnall has done where all the companions and cast feels equally distributed in terms of runtime. Paltraki does feel a bit soundlined, but he still gets enough to do, I think. Yeah. I love the story with Ryan and Graham. I know everyone was looking forward to the fist bump, which got delayed to this episode rather than in the last. I think the impact of the granddad moment could have been saved. Personally, I would have saved it for the moment when Ryan is trying to convince him not to kill Tim Shaw. I would have had him say, because I think that would have been a great moment, where if he'd said, Grandma or something, Grace wouldn't want you to do this. Grace would want you to be the bigger man. Your wife would want you to be the bigger man. I think that would have been a better scene to break up the granddad. And then when they had him on the ground, they could have fist bumped him and then had that great big, nice, emotional moment, rather than maybe wasting it in last week's episode. Just to give the series a more, connected feel to it, rather than just, playing around with it a bit. And doing things, I think that scene should have been saved for the finale, personally. The Doctor and Yaz, they get enough to do. They work together nicely. She has some nice scenes with Paltraki. Yaz is very good with the guest cast. She's had some nice moments with the guest cast. She had some nice moments with Hane. I personally maybe would have chosen her to stay with Hane last week over Ryan. But I still like that relationship between Ryan and Hane as well anyway. Yeah, Ryan, that relationship. The Doctor did verge on a bit annoying this week. I think her annoyingness comes along with Chris Chibnall's bad writing. Her height of her annoyingness was in the Saranga conundrum, and quite a lot of that is transferred over here. What else? On the concept of the planets, You know, the planet stealing reminded me of the Series 4 finale. I wish they kind of set that up throughout the series, how those 5 planets were disappearing, maybe one was noted every week, like they did in Series 4, although that would have been very much reminiscent of Series 4. In fact, in many ways, this does feel like a bit like a Series 4 finale. In the way they were also using the planets to create a big Death Star, like, you know, like still a Star Killer base in The Force Awakens. It reminded me of that, in the way they were doing it. Was that they were using planets like in Journey's End, like with the reality bomb. So it's sort of a mix of those two things. I wish they Chris Chibnall's era, one of my biggest problems with it is he's tried to make every episode secular, and it's probably one of the reasons why the ratings are dropping, is that there's nothing to compel them to keep coming back for more, particularly with each episode feeling a bit like a filler episode of each series. It's kind of like that story situation without having any two-parters with a cliffhanger to make them want to come back next week. That's one of the things Chris Chibnall has really suffered on when creating his run of episodes. And it's such an annoying thing, because I kind of expected there to be more two-parters, because shows like Broadchurch, the episodes were all connected. I believe each season was a case, and they worked together on solving that case between the two characters who were played by David Tennant and Olivia Colman. So I was really surprised when he said there would be no two-parters, and it kind of surprised me. I think this episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, is the closest we'll have us to a two-part. I hope he does a two-parter in season 12. Although at this rate, given his writing, I kind of hope he doesn't write much more than the season premiere and a two-part season finale, maybe one in the middle, but I wouldn't want him to write very much next season, because he is by far the weakest writer in the pot at the moment. And he didn't have an overarching theme, which is something, even if you hadn't had any two-parters, if he'd just had a reference to the Stenza each episode leading up to the return of Tim Shaw, or a reference to each of the planets that we're missing, maybe have a reference to the Stenza 1 week, 5 out of the 10 weeks. Of course, you'd have The Woman Who Fell to Earth and this final episode, and then you'd have a couple of the other 3 referenced throughout, maybe like one in the Witchfinders when the Morak said that maybe they could have been the Stenza as well, like sort of leading into that, some Stenza that had been banished in that woods. It would just give this series more of a like a parcel, like more tied up together, rather than disjointed and unconnected. I think is very much a word I would use to describe this series. Really, I have to say there's not much to say here, because there isn't much that really happens. Again, like in Arachnids of the UK, nothing really happens. You can't really talk about much because, you know, not much happens. It reminds me of Smile in that context. I think Smile is an episode where once again not much happened and didn't have the greatest of resolution. I think this series, all of Chris Chibnall's episodes have been replicas of Smile in many ways. We're in that same format. I mean, an episode like Smile every once in a while is alright, but when all 5 of Chris Chibnall's stories this year have followed that formula, it's kind of the kind of thing I'd expect from a guest writer, not really the showrunner, and it shows once again that Chris Chibnall maybe wasn't the best guy for this role. I strongly believe that Chris Chibnall was quite possibly one of the worst people they could have chosen to be a showrunner. I mean, he had the success with Broadchurch, but his work on Doctor Who is not the greatest, and to be honest, I did expect better from him than this season, actually, if I'm honest. Yeah, not much else to say. It's really predictable, as I said. Except from the Desolation Theory. I think the Desolation Theory would have been a better season finale, because at least that had been set up. Because at least that had a reasonable amount of setup. I mean, the Stenza were referenced in episode 2, and the sniper bots, interestingly, were reused here. I guess they're kind of a Stenza thing. I mean, they might reappear in every episode with the Stenza, I guess, because they have red lights instead of blue lights, because the ones in the Ghost Miner had blue. They just refer to them as sniper bots, so they don't really think much of them. But yeah, I don't know, there's still a desolation theory around there. It's not explicitly said not to be desolation. Maybe those 5 planets going back into orbit knocked Ranskoor AV Kolos knocked it out of orbit, and then thus it becoming desolation. I don't know. It seems unlikely. It's still a theory, but you never know, it might be true. So overall, this was a solid episode. Not a good finale though, and I think Chris Chibnall's episodes have been just a pass, which is not a good thing really. I want outstanding episodes every week, which is a shame because I actually felt during series 9 and 10 we were finally going somewhere with it. I think we had a nice amount of representation of all these other things, diversity in Doctor Who that I think maybe Doctor Who had lacked in. I think this episode very much focuses on the selling point of it being the most diverse Doctor Who season yet. And yes, it plays to that, but it focuses on that, which is, sure it is, I'm all for representation in television and media. It's just when they go overboard and it doesn't quite click, it doesn't quite work, is quite a negative thing. This is an example of over-diversifying and making it your main focus rather than plots or stories. I think this episode is very much less guilty of that rather than the whole season. I just did not like the stanza at all. I guess that kind of, it's just, I was referring to Chris Chibnall's episodes as a whole really, and perhaps the series as a whole. It feels like he ran with the concept of a returning villain, just hoped that would be enough to shut us up. But unfortunately he chose a returning villain that none of us like. And this is another problem with Chris Chibnall's era, I feel, is he probably should have brought back a villain or two, because this series really seriously lacks in good villains. I mean seriously so. Every villain this season has been weak. Utterly and terribly weak. I have not really liked or wanted to hate any of the villains. I think I liked the Petite, but only because it was cute. It was not a good villain. It just did not work at all. The villains this series have not worked. You know, the usuals were good, the VFX, the music were all good as usual, etc. But yeah. So overall I'm going to give this episode a 7 out of 10. I have revised all my scores for series 11. I'm going to rewatch all the episodes before I make an overview video next week for series 11, when I'm going to rank all the episodes, and after rewatching them, if I decide to change some things, I might, I've already changed some things after just thinking about it, but I'm going to rewatch them and just make sure all those scores are what I want them to be, solidly and totally. But yeah, look out for that video next week. Review of the New Year's special coming soon after, of course, Christmas. I'm also planning to do some Christmas themed coffee video maybe, or something like that, or maybe some Christmas themed Doctor Who videos. I might sprinkle a couple of things in before Christmas. It depends. I've only ever been doing one video a week. I am a very busy student. I have got school, homework and other kinds of things, and that's one of the reasons why these episodes keep getting delayed, is because my dad's busy and I edit together. It's one of those nice family things, personally. I know a lot of people, I probably could edit this by myself, but I don't know if I want to, because it's kind of a nice special family thing. It's like those coffee videos, because I do them with him. He quite likes doing that with me, which is probably why I keep doing it, really, because, you know, they aren't the greatest videos on the earth and they hardly get the greatest viewing numbers. I mean, none of my videos do, but considering I have 11 subscribers, the videos do get decent views, considering. And maybe I should do, I do feel like I should do some more coffee videos. There probably will be a coffee video between the Series 11 overview and the New Year's Day special. I'm also planning to get some other things out after in the new year. There might be some interesting new Doctor Who related content. I don't know, maybe I'll go back and review the New Who episodes since they're all on iPlayer. I might do Classic Who, but I don't have all of Classic Who. I have about 52 stories of Classic Who, which I know is a lot, but there's a lot of Classic Who. So, yeah, I would do all of Classic Who, but I don't have every story, so it'd be kind of criminal. But, yeah. In terms of New Year's Day theories, I mean, I've got the trailers in. I did just come up with something bloody obvious. Spoiler warning, if you do not want to know a single thing for the New Year's Day special or a theory, but if you've watched the trailer, it's incredibly obvious who's returning at Christmas. Especially considering the Sun was reporting it. I mean, not the Sun, the Mirror or something was reporting the return of the Daleks. So at this point, it would be kind of a bit, you know, I mean, I'm keeping my spectrum open. I'm saying maybe the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Master, the Whirring. I don't know why I put the Whirring in there, but, you know, someone keeps bringing up the Whirring a lot, and I keep thinking about the Whirring. I haven't even watched the Whirring. Maybe it's the Zygons, who knows, the Maya. But it's going to be the Daleks, let's face it. Because he said no returning villains during season 11. So, could it be the Daleks? A lot of people saying there'll be a new redesigned look, which would be good. Thumbs up to that. We need a new look redesign for the Daleks. Obviously the Rani, you know, stuff in those usual stuff. But I swear if it's the Stenza, I will kill Chris Chibnall. I will come and find you and rip you apart because you are really getting on my nerves with the Stenza. They are so bad. Just bring back a new villain. I don't care. An old villain. I don't care anymore. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe down below. And yeah, I guess I'll see you next week for my Series 11 overview. Bye!